of our Earth. We recently spoke to Dr. Rupa Maria and Raj Patel, co-authors of the new book Inflamed, Deep Medicine and the Anatomy of Injustice. Dr. Maria is a physician, activist, mother, and composer. She's also an associate professor of medicine at UC San Francisco.
Racism drives inflammation on all sorts of levels in the body. And so that these structures that reinforce racism, whether they're redlining or predatory loans or the crappy foods that are put into the neighborhoods of predominantly brown and black people, all of these things are systems of damage that predispose black and brown people to worse health outcomes. Then you look at the healthcare industry itself.
Oh! Call in, connect. To speak to Randi, call 561-270-3844. 561-270-3844.
Think about just what police departments cost, right? There's an article from, I think it's 2017, by scholar Eleanor Lunsford, who's at Golden Gate University School of Law, where she talks about the cost of policing kind of period, right? And she identifies up until 2014, from 2004 to 2014, the Chicago Police Department spent $521 million on police misconduct claims. New York City, from 2006 to 2011, spent $348 million. LA spent $100 million between 2002 and 2011, and even a place like Oakland that has tremendous problems with their school district, where their school district is underfunded by roughly $17 or $20 million, spent $74 million between 1990 and 2014 just on police misconduct claims. So from those four major U.S. cities, you're talking about over $1 billion over roughly a 10-year period.
That is an amazing amount of money to be spending on claims against police officers who engage in misconduct against their communities that they are tasked with serving and protecting. So now you understand why police reform is such a big issue, and it was such a huge deal all through the year 2020, the entire year. Not only did we watch, an enormous amount of a protest happen, and by the way, 99.9% was peaceful. Just in case you weren't served enough yesterday, information about the interlopers, the people who went to Minneapolis to do violence so that people would be bamboozled into believing that BLM actually did violence in their own communities during their peaceful protests. I found, somebody sent me another bit of information because yesterday, no, it was last month, sorry, August 10th, they sent me the sentencing document from another person who went to Minneapolis with the intent to upend the peaceful protests, sort of a false flag, if you will. A Trump supporter, a white supremacist, went to Minneapolis to upend the peaceful protests by actively engaging in arson and violence. Yes, the man actually set fire to a cell phone store, to a Sprint store. And what he did was he first went on Facebook. He was from Galesburg, Illinois, not from Minneapolis. But he posted messages on his Facebook account referencing the public protests that were going to happen in the Twin Cities following the death of George Floyd. And he said, and this isn't going to sound like normal English because the guy is dumb. He wrote, "I'm going to Minneapolis tomorrow. Who coming? Only goons. I'm renting hotel rooms." Then on May 29th, 2020, his name is Matthew Lee Rupert. He actually broadcast on Facebook Live a video saying he was in Minneapolis, and he said he came, quote, to riot. And you can see him. He's handing out artillery shell fireworks, encouraging violence against law enforcement officers, actively damaging property, breaking into buildings, and looting businesses. And then he pled guilty. And when the documents were filed with the court, and other videos were entered into evidence, you saw videos of Mr. Rupert asking for lighter fluid in front of a boarded up Sprint store on Nicollet Avenue in Minneapolis, a store that he had canvassed and eventually entered through a back room and told others he had located the safe in the store. And he had other people join him and then knocked several boxes into a pile on the ground, doused the pile of boxes with lighter fluid, and then directed another individual, a kid, to light the pile on fire. Then he stated, quote, "I lit it on fire." And then the store burned down. He drove 400 miles from Galesburg, Illinois to Minnesota to engage in this arson and violence, all while broadcasting it, saying peaceful protest was not on his agenda. Arson, looting, property damage, and the glorification of it is what he had in mind. He said he had no purpose other than endangering the peaceful protest by actively encouraging violence against law enforcement and personally destroying communities' businesses. He was sentenced last month to 105 months in prison for doing that. So, and, you know, we play you Umbrella Man whenever this thing comes up because that's a easy to understand video of a guy who decided he was going to dress the way he thinks Antifa dresses and really was a white supremacist from the Aryan Cowboys who also broke into an AutoZone store, started looting it, and started fires all over Minneapolis and wanted to do it so he could blame the peaceful protesters who were protesting for police reform after the death of George Floyd. The bill that failed yesterday in negotiations between the only black senator that the Republicans have, Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina, and Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey. I don't know why I keep wanting to move Cory Booker to Pennsylvania, but New Jersey. The reason why that failed is because Cory Booker was because Tim Scott was just yanking Cory Booker's chain long enough to delay any passage, any vote on this bill till after the protests subsided. That's what Karen Bass was saying last night to Lawrence O'Donnell when asked, why do you think it failed? She said, we missed our moment. The moment to do this was when everybody was out on the street around the world saying Black Lives Matter, around the world saying misconduct by police is unconscionable and insufferable, around the world. But we missed our moment. And so they just started supplanting the message of police reform with defund the police, which was said by some people, but never legislated. It was never written into any legislation. In fact, the legislation I just read you the bullet points from do nothing at all except enforce federal law and say if you take federal dollars in your police force, you'll comply with these federal standards. And none of these standards had anything to do with anything other than you act like a fool. You beat people for no reason. You shoot people for no reason. You don't have a body cam on. You don't have a cam in your car. Well, you can't get federal funding. That's it. We'll take that funding and we'll put it into emergency response. A team, paramedics, mental health professionals, peer support, whatever, and we'll relieve you of the duty of having to answer these calls, which should help police. You would think police would want that. You know why they don't want it? I mean, they want it, but they don't want to have to be accountable for their bad behavior in order to get relief. This is just like the corporations of America. They all want us to be able to, feed our kids. They're all for that. They all want an educated workforce. They're all for, pre-K to grade 16 free public school. They're all for that. They just don't want to pay for it. And that becomes defund. They're trying to defund. They're trying to this. They're trying to... No, nobody was trying to defund anything. In fact, they were trying to fund and reward good policing and help the police.
Clear for takeoff. Randi Rhodes Air Force.